Welcome to Health Club with Julia. I'm your host, health coach, and registered dietitian, Julia Campagna. I'm on a mission to bridge the gap between looking your best and living your life to the fullest. After years of over-dieting, struggling with disordered eating, and destroying my social life, I finally found how to reach my dream physique without sacrificing the things I love. Now I'm sharing all my strategies and education with you. We'll be talking all things health, including hormones, metabolism, and lifestyle to help you cut out the confusion and start living. So get cozy and join the club. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. As always, I am so happy you are here. As you may already assume from the title of this episode is for all of my PCOS girlies, or if you suspect that you have PCOS. This is a pretty common thing to have in women, and it can cause a lot of confusion, unease, anxiety. Obviously, there could be issues with fertility. If you're listening to this, you can literally hear probably my cat playing with her toy. She just loves to play all day long. But PCOS can be something that is just really an unknown for a lot of people. And I don't blame you. I feel like it is kind of talked about, but especially when you get that diagnosis, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm done for. Like, there's so many issues going on. What do I even do from here? So I want to use this episode to teach you more about it, what it actually is, because I always feel like when you know more about something, you have more power over it, you have more insight, it doesn't scare you as much, maybe. So I want to teach you more about what it is, different types, and I want to go over some things that you can focus on to help you manage and navigate your PCOS. So we are going to start with the information side of it. So what even is PCOS? You might not even know what it is. You might be thinking about it or gotten this diagnosis recently and just been like, oh, I don't know where to go. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So what is PCOS? PCOS is an inflammatory endocrine disorder that prevents the ovarian follicles from reaching the ovulation stage. So basically, to simplify what this is, first of all, it's an inflammatory endocrine disorder. So there is going to be inflammation going on in the body. It prevents the ovarian follicles. So our follicles are what house our eggs. So our egg is inside of the follicle grows and matures, and that mature follicle is what is then, one is chosen, and then that opens up and releases the egg. So that is what a follicle is. So it prevents these follicles from reaching that ovulation stage. It prevents it from releasing that egg for ovulation. So that is what it's doing. So this can cause, for more obvious reasons, this can cause significant delays in ovulation, where you might not be ovulating until a lot later in your cycle, so it can cause very long cycles. It can also then cause irregular. So sometimes you might have a 42-day cycle, sometimes you might have a 30-day cycle, sometimes you might have longer than 40-day cycles. It can be very irregular, or it could be non-existent at all. And your periods could be non-existent at all, and that is also scary and could make you anxious. And so it's very unpredictable, and PCOS, I think, is something that unpredictability does add to anxiety, because you're like, oh, one cycle I have, a fairly normal bleed, and my cycle was fairly normal, and then the next cycle it's like, what the heck happened? And so I kind of feel like it's very up and down, and it's really not predictable. But that's in a nutshell what it is and what it can do to your cycles, your menstrual cycles overall. Now, how do we even get diagnosed with this? I think that this is really, really important because if you suspect you have it, you need to go to the doctor. And if somebody has ever told you that you have it and you have not gotten these tests done, you need to go back to that doctor and say, I would like tests to be done to confirm that I actually do have it. Because funny story, which isn't so funny, but I was talking to somebody recently who said that they had PCOS and they were wanting to learn how to manage it, how to, reach their goals with PCOS, learn more about hormones and how to work to balance hormones as best as possible, what nutrition should she be focusing on, all this stuff surrounding PCOS because she was told she had PCOS. Then we got into the discussion further and I was like, okay, how did you come about knowing this? And she was like, the doctor just told me. And I was like, oh, okay, did he run any tests? She was like, no, 0 tests. He didn't do anything, not even an ultrasound, like nothing. And he said, oh, you probably have PCOS because of symptoms that she was experiencing. Now, that is the first part of diagnosis, I would say, is looking into symptoms. What do you have going on? But if somebody comes to me with symptoms, I would always tell them go see a doctor to get a diagnosis. You can't just tell somebody they have something without doing any tests to actually see if they do in fact have it. So that was mind-blowing to me. I literally told her, go back to that doctor, go get labs done, get your ultrasound done, talk to them about what it takes to actually diagnose PCOS, because clearly they have no idea what it is and how to even go about it. So whoever doctor that is shouldn't be in that field doing that if they're just going to arbitrarily say, oh, you have PCOS. She might actually have PCOS. Yes, he might be correct on that. But to do no work to even investigate and diagnose that is mind-blowing and obviously gets me worked up. So anyway, I want to go over diagnosis and how to be diagnosed with it because I have seen people get diagnosed without even trying to figure out if that's actually true or not. So there are 3 main things that you need to get done to see if you have PCOS. It's called the Rotterdam criteria. You can look that up. But in order to be diagnosed, you have to have 2 of 3 conditions. So I'm going to go through all 3 conditions. So 1 is oligo-ovulation, or in other words, this is irregular ovulation or anovulation. Anovulation is not ovulating. Irregular ovulation is, like I said, ovulation comes at different times of your cycle, each cycle. It's not consistent. So that's number 1, which with that one, you can kind of like I guess, quote unquote, test using different methods to confirm ovulation, but that's not like a blood sample or anything like that. I mean, you can use blood to also kind of figure out what's going on with the body, but there's different methods to go over finding if you are having regular or irregular ovulation. The second thing is having hyperandrogenism. So this is elevated levels of androgens. So DHEA, testosterone, those are your main 2. You need to go get tested for this. You need to get blood labs done, a Dutch test done, something that tests your hormones. You need to actually go and get tested to even see if you have this. You can't just look at somebody and say, oh, you have high androgens. Yes, there can be symptoms. More facial hair, darker hair, there are different symptoms of high androgens. You can't just tell somebody that they have it though just by looking at them. So you have to go and actually get a test done to see if you have that. Then the third thing is polycystic ovaries. So this is enlarged ovaries that contain at least 12 follicles measuring between 2 and 9 millimeters on an ultrasound. So you need to go and get an ultrasound done. Again, you can't just look at somebody and say, oh, you have polycystic ovaries. You can't just say that. You need to go get an ultrasound done, look at the scan, and it has to be, again, that specific criteria. So in order to be diagnosed, you need to have 2 out of the 3 of these. If you only have cysts, that's not enough to say you have PCOS. If you only have irregular ovulation, that's not enough to say you have PCOS. You need at least 2 of the 3 to get diagnosed with it. So that is how doctors will diagnose if you have it or not. And I just want to put a little note here on cysts. This is what I was saying with you need to have 2 out of 3, because just having cysts alone doesn't really necessarily mean you have PCOS, because 20% of women who do not have PCOS have cysts. So you can have cysts and not have PCOS. And then also 30% of women who do have PCOS don't have cysts. So even if you have PCOS, you might not have cysts. So that one's very, it could go either way. Again, this is why they have this criteria where you need at least 2 of the 3 to show that you actually have it. And fun fact on cysts are actually antral follicles that haven't gone through the maturation process because it's been inhibited. So in other words, the cysts in PCOS are the follicles that house our egg, that grow and mature to then release the egg later on around ovulation. The cysts are those follicles that haven't been fully matured and haven't reached that ovulation stage, and then they just kind of accumulate. So when you ovulate, when somebody does in fact ovulate, they release the egg, that follicle opens up, releases the egg, that follicle then becomes the corpus luteum, and it shrivels and it basically like disintegrates. So that is us maturing a follicle and then basically getting rid of that follicle. It disintegrates, it shrinks, it shrivels up, and that's the process of follicles. In PCOS, cysts, if you have cysts, it's follicles growing but not releasing that egg, and so they just stay at that stage. They don't then turn into the corpus luteum, shrivel, shrink. They just stay at that stage and become cysts. And that is what that is. So in case you're wondering what the cysts are, how they got there, that is how that happens. But anyway, that's diagnosis. If you suspect that you have cysts, or if you have gotten a diagnosis, please make sure that you have gone through these tests before just saying you do have it. That's what I would say with diagnosis. Now I want to go over different types, because there are different types of PCOS, and if you have done research on this, if you've been on social media about this, there have been people, and even I have, I think, said this before, like previously, that the different types of PCOS are like inflammatory PCOS, post-pill PCOS, adrenal PCOS. While yes, it's true that these things have an impact in PCOS, I think of these things more as categories, not types. So I want to go over the actual specific types that you could have so that you can navigate which one you might be. So there's 2 types, and then there's 2 subtypes under each of those. So the 2 types of PCOS is classic PCOS or non-classic PCOS. And then within that, there's 2 subtypes. So in classic PCOS, you can either have type A, which is full-blown PCOS. You have all 3 of the conditions in the Rotterdam criteria. So you have the polycystic ovaries, you have high androgens, and you have irregular ovulation or anovulation. So you have all 3 of those. That is full-blown, full-spectrum PCOS. Then you have type B under the classic PCOS, which includes ovulatory dysfunction, so either irregular ovulation or anovulation, and hyperandrogenism, so you have high androgens, but you don't have polycystic ovaries. That's type B. So you have 2 out of the 3, you just don't have the cysts on your ovaries. Then going over to the second type, non-classic PCOS, there's 2 subtypes as well. So in non-classic PCOS, there's type C, which includes hyperandrogenism and polycystic ovaries. So you have the cysts, you have high androgens, but you have regular ovulation. And then there's type D, which includes ovulatory dysfunction, so irregular ovulation, and polycystic ovaries, but not high androgens. So that's all the different types. You either have classic, non-classic, and then whatever subtype you fall under. So that's the types. So I just wanted to make sure you're clear on that, because that can help you understand, one, more what's going on inside your body, two, have a better plan in place to help manage your PCOS, and yeah, it just gives you a clearer image of what is going on with your body specific to what kind of PCOS you have. Now I want to go over how PCOS impacts different hormones, androgens, estrogen, progesterone. I want to go over all of that, so again, you understand what is actually happening inside your body and how it's affecting different hormones. So how PCOS impacts your androgens. So again, your androgens are testosterone, DHT, androstenedione, and DHEA. These ones are your main androgens. Main ones that you probably hear most are DHEA and testosterone. But PCOS increases these androgens due to either insulin resistance, causing the ovaries to make more androgens, or low cortisol, and your body is trying to make more of that. So that's kind of the two ways that PCOS can increase androgens due to either of these mechanisms. So it is important, again, to understand, do you have insulin resistance? Yes, no. How is your cortisol? Again, this is where those categories come out, where people say, different types of PCOS include insulin-resistant PCOS, adrenal PCOS. Yes, these things do impact PCOS and how things operate internally. So it is important to figure out if you have either of those things, just to see, again, the modality of how PCOS is showing up in your body. I'm not going to go too far into that, but that is kind of how that is affected. And women will show high androgen levels in different ways. They can present in hair growth and, other parts of the body that you might not suspect. So a lot of the times it's facial hair or on your neck, low back, back in general. So having hair growth in areas that are quote-unquote not common for females. You might have more acne on the face or other parts of the body, so again, like back, other areas that might not be common for you. You might have unwanted weight gain or the inability to lose weight, so just stubborn weight that you can't get rid of. You may have male pattern baldness, aggression, irregular or absent periods, mid-cycle or ovulatory pain, or chronic anovulation due to these high androgens. So these are some ways that high androgens will present in the body. And how PCOS impacts progesterone and estrogen. Obviously, these ones are main hormones that you probably hear all the time when talking about female hormones. So how does PCOS impact these main female hormones? So progesterone, large amount is released directly after ovulation from the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum, remember, that is the follicle that released the egg. It becomes the corpus luteum and then shrivels and shrinks. This corpus luteum is what pumps out progesterone in our body. That is why progesterone is higher in your luteal phase, because you have this corpus luteum that is triggering progesterone in the body. So a large amount of progesterone is released after ovulation due to the corpus luteum. So most people with PCOS, they don't ovulate consistently. And so their bodies don't produce that surge in progesterone in the luteal phase if they don't have the corpus luteum, because they're not ovulating. This leads to their progesterone levels being chronically low. So they have low progesterone levels in the luteal phase due to not ovulating consistently, or not ovulating at all, and not having that corpus luteum to produce progesterone. In estrogen, this doesn't often surge high enough to kick off the ovulatory process due to inconsistent ovulation. So again, this ovulation that's very inconsistent can cause an impact in estrogen, and your estrogen does need to rise to a certain level to start the ovulation process. So estrogen is higher in your follicular phase to help the body ovulate. So inconsistent ovulation can impact your estrogen levels, and your estrogen might not rise enough to meet that ovulatory need. This can show up as estrogen dominance. Even if it's lower than it needs to be, it can still show up as estrogen dominance in the body, because women with PCOS are only estrogen dominant in relation to low progesterone levels. So if you've listened to any of my previous podcast episodes on the process of ovulation and estrogen dominance, I do have an episode specifically on estrogen dominance. If you've listened to that, you would know that estrogen dominance comes in two ways. You either have regular progesterone levels and high estrogen, or you have low progesterone levels and regular estrogen, but because you have that low progesterone, estrogen is high in relation to. So obviously, if you have chronically low progesterone levels because you're not ovulating consistently, estrogen dominance can be present because you have low progesterone. So in relation to your progesterone, your estrogen is still high. They need to be in balance. So if one of them is off, that can cause estrogen dominance. And there's dysregulated estrogen metabolites. So this is indicative of poor liver function and or gut health. So this can be an issue with metabolizing estrogen if your liver is not functioning as optimally, or if you have any gut health issues, you may not be metabolizing estrogen the way that you need to, aka utilizing it the way that you need to, and therefore it can recirculate, and that can cause elevated estrogen levels. And elevated metabolites would contribute to estrogen dominant symptoms. So PCOS can manifest in different ways with estrogen as well, because estrogen might be low but still higher than the ratio that you need between estrogen and progesterone. So even if it's low, you could still have estrogen dominance, and then that can show different symptoms. Main symptoms of estrogen dominance are things like bad PMS, pain, heavy bleeding, sore breasts. These are all common symptoms of high estrogen. So that is the learning portion of this podcast episode that I wanted to go through. What is PCOS? How do we diagnose it? What different types are there? And how does it impact the hormones in your body? So hopefully you learned something new from all of that. But learning only takes you so far. You could be listening to this and being like, okay, great, I've learned a little bit more about PCOS and what's going on inside my body. What the hell do I do? So now this is where I want to go over kind of where you can start. So there's a few things that I would say to start focusing on with PCOS. So 1, I would start with ruling out blood sugar problems and or insulin dysregulation or resistance, because this is usually a driving factor in PCOS. Again, remember, big issues with PCOS are insulin resistance or cortisol/adrenal problems. So start with that first. Do you have any blood sugar issues? Do you have any insulin resistance going on? You can test for that. You can test fasting insulin. You can test your A1C. You can do some glucose monitoring to check your blood sugar. You can do that kind of work. And then from there, you can try to manage that a little bit better. If that is present, start with blood sugar regulation through food. So main takeaways of blood sugar regulation that we want to focus on. No carbs by themselves. Try to avoid sugary foods like pastries, cakes, cookies, all of that. Pair carbs with a protein, fiber, fat to help stabilize that blood sugar spike. Go for walks after meals. So that's kind of the stuff that you can do through food, but basically never have carbs alone and try to avoid high sugar foods and opt for lower sugar at the time being. You can try to regulate it through supplements. There's different supplements, inositol, there's a bunch. I don't want to go through those though, because that's going to be specific to you. So if you have supplement questions, let me know. And also mindfulness practice. So again, being mindful of all areas of healthy habits. So that's where I would start. Rule out blood sugar and or insulin resistance. If you do have that, start working on your blood sugar through food, supplements, lifestyle, mindful practices. If blood sugar and or insulin problems are not present, I would then look to support your gut and work on underlying inflammation. So as I mentioned at the very start of this, PCOS is an inflammatory disorder. Inflammation is going on. So you do want to focus on navigating inflammation. You also want to focus on supporting the gut. This is very, very important. This impacts your liver. This impacts so many things. Digestion, circulation, a lot of things. So support the gut, work on that inflammation if you don't find that you have blood sugar or insulin problems. And even if you did have those problems too and you were starting to work on the blood sugar management a bit closer, I still would look into gut health and inflammation, but I would start with the blood sugar first and then work my way down. But whether you do or do not have it, I would still work on gut health and inflammation. Then I would also address HPA axis dysregulation with nervous system support. So this helps the adrenals mostly, but really work on your nervous system support. This sounds so cliche. I feel like every time somebody talks about cortisol, adrenals, nervous system, and stress management, but it is so important. So I highly recommend that you do take some time to work through that as well. And lastly, I would also try to reduce exposure to environmental toxins that play a role in PCOS symptomology. So look into your environmental toxins. Try to go low tox as much as possible. This can definitely help you out as well. So those would be like the 4 or 5 things that I would start with. So blood sugar or insulin resistance, check that off, see if you have it or not. Then go gut health and take care of your inflammation. Then go nervous system regulation, HPA axis support. Then I would go environmental toxins and looking into that. So that's where I would start. If you have any questions on that, let me know, and specifics with any of those things. But that is my PCOS in a nutshell episode. I hope that you guys learned something new. I hope that this helped ease any anxiety if you have any regarding PCOS. I hope that this also gave you kind of a path that you can take right now to work on PCOS and try to manage this as best as possible for yourself. As I mentioned, if you have any questions on this stuff, please DM me. My DMs are open. I will leave my Instagram linked in the show notes below, so you can just easily click there and find my page and message me over there. But I would be happy to answer any questions, go through this more, dive into what you need specifically if you need extra support. So please let me know if you do. I am always open for conversations. But otherwise, again, I hope you learned something new. If you liked this, spread the word, share it with somebody who might need to hear it, and I will see you guys at the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. If you loved the episode, share the podcast and tag me, and subscribe so you don't miss any further episodes. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM. Thanks for being a part of the club. See you next time.